Hey guys, so we're going to make our last set of cards now. It's going to be 4 cards, but they're all pretty fast. So we talked in the last one about the Republican Party. I forgot to add to this one that it was started in 1854. So just 4 years after that, there was another momentous occasion in our country, and it was called the Lincoln-Douglas debates. So Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, and Douglas were actually both running to be senator from Illinois. They both wanted to go be in the U.S. Senate. And so this happened in 1858, just 4 years after the Republican Party formed. And again, they're running for senator from Illinois. So these two had a series of 7 different debates. Lincoln was a lawyer and he was really good at arguing and debating. And so he challenged Douglas to this series of 7 different debates. And it was really popular. It was published in the newspaper and all of that, what both men had said. Now, both of these guys were kind of anti-slavery. They were both from the North. But Douglas was not quite as good at arguing and making his points. He still managed to win. So Lincoln did not win the Senate seat. He was a Republican. I should probably spell that out because otherwise it looks like representatives. Douglas was a Democrat. And again, they both were against slavery, but they argued different things about it. Douglas said, oh, people should have popular sovereignty. We should let each state decide for itself what it wants to do. Lincoln just said, well, I don't want slavery spreading at all. But at the same time, he didn't feel like slavery should be banned completely in the South because he knew what that would do to the U.S. economy and all of that. And he also wasn't completely for equality between the races. He actually said that in these debates. He didn't think that blacks and whites were equals, but he also was not in favor of slavery. So the cool thing about this debate, and the reason it's famous, is because it made Lincoln famous. These 7 debates made Lincoln famous all over for being against slavery. Even though he lost. And this is important because just 2 years later, he's going to run for president. And when he runs for president, the South already knows this guy. They already know everything he said. They've seen it in the newspapers, and they know what kind of a person he's going to be if he's elected president. And so they're very much against the idea of even putting him on their ballots. So that brings us to the election of 1860. So in the election of 1860, Lincoln wins. We're not going to talk about the whole election and what happened. I will tell you very briefly that the Democratic Party split into the Northern Democrats and the Southern Democrats because they could not agree on slavery and what should happen. And when that Democratic Party split, it was basically taking all their voters and splitting them into 2 chunks, which left more votes for Lincoln than any other candidate. Now, what's crazy about this election is Lincoln won, and most of the southern states did not even put him on the ballot. He didn't win a single southern state. Again, they knew what he was famous for. They knew that he was going to be against slavery, and they weren't happy about it. So as soon as he wins, without a single southern state voting for him, and in many of them he wasn't even on the ballot, as soon as he wins, 7 southern states secede. Now we're going to do another card that tells what this word means. All right, so we'll talk about that in a second. But 7 southern states secede immediately before he has even taken office. And we'll do our next card now. So the next card, we're going to put the word secession, but it's also the word secede. This is card number 13. Notice there's not as many pictures on these cards, so it goes a little bit faster. We're going to put the word secession. That's what the vocabulary word is in your book. But underneath, I'm going to write secede. So this is something that many southern states had been arguing for a long time in our country's history. You'll remember it. If we don't like something, we can nullify it and not follow it. And if this country isn't doing what's good for us, we can leave. That's what the word secede means. So on this card on the back, I just want you to say that it's to leave the nation. These 7 states immediately said, I'm out. This president's not going to do anything good for our part of the nation. We are the South. We don't feel like we're the United States. That word united is definitely not true. We're the South. We're going to leave. We're going to break away and form our own country. So these states did. They formed their own country, and they called their country the Confederate States of America. Now, if you look at what the abbreviation for that would be, you'll notice that that abbreviation CSA, if you ever see Civil War soldiers' uniforms from that time from the South, if they're an officer or somebody who with a fancier uniform, it'll say CSA on there. So there's the USA and the CSA. Now, obviously, the North did not recognize this secession. The North said, no, you can't just leave. You can't just declare yourself your own independent nation. So the North said, no, you still belong to us. But at this point, there was no war started. Shortly after Lincoln became president and was actually sworn in, that's when the war actually started. And it started at a place that is our last card for this chapter, a place called Fort Sumter. So Fort Sumter is famous because it is in South Carolina, which was the first state to break away. And South Carolina said to the United States government, this is our fort now. Even though it's a federal fort from the United States, it's our fort. And so Lincoln decided, you know what, I'm just going to send supplies to Fort Sumter to resupply the fort. And so when he decided to do that, South Carolina decided not to let him. So this is a federal fort. That means it's a USA fort. And they were holding up there and, you know, holding out and getting ready to fight back against South Carolina if they had to. And Lincoln sent supplies. He decided he needed to resupply the fort, make sure they had all the food they needed because the South was kind of cutting them off. And Southern troops decided to attack it. So Southern troops attacked it in April of 1861. And this is the start of the Civil War. Really the first battle ever of the Civil War. There's an official real battle coming later between armies, but this is the first battle at Fort Sumter. So it's where the Civil War starts. And this fire that's been burning between the North and the South that gasoline kept getting added onto finally erupted into war. And remember, a civil war, we talked about it last year in 7th grade a lot. A civil war is between people in the same country. Now, these two halves called it different things. The North called it the War of Southern Secession, and the South called it the War of Northern Aggression. Today, we know it as the Civil War.